Why do you think most people have to hit rock bottom to actually start improving their life?
You actually don't. This is a belief system that people go, I got to bounce off the bottom first. One of the thoughts I had back then is, with my luck, the gun's going to go off. I'm going to shoot myself in the spinal cord, and then I'm going to live to 250 years old.
How can people use that methodology to really live the life that they truly desire, to even realize that they have that inside them?
Think about yourself as an old person with regret. Nobody ever complains about what they did or have a regret for what they did. They have a regret for all the stuff they didn't do. Either you evolve or you dissolve. Nothing's staying the same. Most people, they get paralysis through analysis. So they got to come up with the whole plan. Life doesn't go to plan, so it's a waste of energy. There's only three things you got to know: where you are, where do you want to be, and then...
Welcome, Kurek. Thank you so much for joining us. Look, I want to start with just a bit of flavor about your life today, how you help people, and what really drives you in life.
Well, what really drives me is that I love people. I always have. So it's been something since I was a kid. I don't know. I watched people grow up, in front of me. And it seemed like after high school, for most people, life really sucked. That life, that high school was the peak of their life. And then afterwards, it just became work and struggle and got out of shape and lost your passion and the rest of those things. But then you started seeing other people who had really amazing lives, at that stage, like Elvis. I mean, I guess we learned behind the scenes that he had different stuff, but it sure seemed like, man, what an adventure he was living, so that I was inspired to want to create more for my life first. And then it just became my passion, because once you start, using tools and strategies to increase your own life, you become really abundant. The first thing I see with people is they want to babble. They just want to share it with everybody, and they almost kind of want to force it on people. And then you kind of mellow out, and then you really get to the place where it's not for everybody. I mean, everybody has equal potential, but not everybody will use it. Not everybody wants it. And so, my job is really to help the people who want to go from what I call the majority into the minority, because it's the minority that changes the world, and it's the majority that waits for it to be changed.
And you've had this passion for people, but I just want to go back to the place that you talk about in your book, this helicopter crash that completely changed your life, and the dark times that followed, and just how you were able to transform such a tragic event into such a beautiful life.
Well, I guess a little backstory a little bit is I used to be an actor in Hollywood. I did 38 motion pictures. I've just finished a movie, Lockup with Sylvester Stallone. Now I'm on the way to the Philippines to work on Delta Force 2 with Chuck Norris. I mean, I'm 27 years old. I got to say, as a young man, I'm like on cloud nine. First, I get to work with Sly, and then now Chuck Norris. But also, I've done over 500 movies behind the camera. So I've been a key and dolly grip, worked in the lighting department, the assistant to a director for 13 years. So crew members, are like family to me, because when you're spending 15 hours a day with each other. And so when I get to Delta Force 2, my best friend, Mike Graham's the key grip on the show. Don Marshall, lighting director. Jeff Brewer, stunt guy that I've worked with many, many times and been friends with. So we're having the time of our life, honestly. And the other thing is that we were kind of going from low budget pictures to now we're working on big budget pictures, which is, we're just on, top of the world. And then I was in a helicopter crash on set. It was a Friday, last shot of the day, wasn't even a stunt. We were just on this palatial grounds of this mansion that the Marcos family built as a summer home, and it's on the rim of an extinct volcano, and down in the crater is a resort and a lake, and I mean, it's just stunning, picturesque. But I've been doing hairy stunts all day in the helicopter, and all we had to do is go 15 feet, shoot 2 lines of dialogue, come back down. And so we rehearse, everything's great, we get ready to shoot. Cameraman shifts the camera a little bit. I noticed that he moved it. I said, "Can you see me?" He goes, "Nope, you're out of frame." So I go, "Oh, step out." Now I would have made 400 extra dollars like I did in every flight, but I'm just like, "Ah, I got 10 more weeks. I'll just make room." The other door gunner steps out, chopper goes up, it's 15 feet, drifts out over the edge of the mountain. The engine has a mechanical malfunction and shuts off, and then nose dives about 1,500 feet. And I was the first person to get to the wreckage. And, Mike tried to get him out, but the chopper started on fire. By the time I got to him, I knew it was fully engulfed. He was on fire in my arms. I carried him out and then died in my arms on the way to the hospital. Lost 5 of my friends that day. Mike was 29 years old. I was 27 at the time. So my life really went into a tailspin. You have survivor guilt. You feel like a failure because you couldn't save people. You start focusing on the darkest parts of the story, I guess. So every night I had drugs up my nose and gun in my mouth and cigarettes and booze. I mean, I wasn't partying. I was just trying to kill myself. Thank God I'm not a success at everything in life. And it went on for probably over 2 years, maybe 2.5 years. And so dark, so, um, you know, consuming that you just don't think there's a way out anymore. Like this is my life. And from a guy who was very positive and into personal development and all that stuff to where I went to, lost all my friends because nobody really trusted me anymore. Then one day I woke up and I had a new thought. And that is that your life's not your own, that there's people who care about you and love you. And instead of them helping you up, you're dragging them down because negative energy is a much heavier, denser energy than positive energy. So I asked myself a new question, which was transformational. It's still one I use to this day on any challenging situation. And that is, what's great about this? And I know it's a really unique question, but the funny thing is, whatever you ask, you'll get the answer to. And so I held myself to that standard that I was going to get an answer because the first answer is nothing, but I said, no, you got to answer it. And I thought, well, at least Mike died in my arms, not in a stranger's arms, and that all the care given to him and all the other people to keep them alive was done because I was there witnessing it and a part of it. That I saved 2 people's lives that day. You kind of forget about that when you're caught up in your drama. And the last one is that I lived. And I thought about that if my 5 friends had a chance to live again, they wouldn't be putting a gun in their mouth. They'd be living after facing death. They'd be playing a game differently. So I made a promise to my friends that I would make their death count for something positive, that I would do something really positive on the planet with it. And that day I unscrewed a broom pole out of a broom and held it over my head like a samurai warrior and cut a line in the sand in my backyard like a sword. And I said, once I step over this line, I'm done. I am done. And you got to really get to that place where you go, I'm done. I'm done being fat. I'm done being lonely. I'm done being poor. I'm done being broke, whatever that is. And because until then, you're complacent, but done. And I stepped over the line and gave up cocaine, cigarettes, alcohol abuse, gave all my guns away. Not to just people wandering down the street. I gave them to gun collector friends. And my life today is a byproduct of making that decision and then staying consistent with that decision. And now it's 35 years later. I've been in front of over 1 million people and helped tens of thousands of people through my programs and lived up to my promise.
Why do you think most people have to hit that sort of rock bottom or have that tragic event or whatever it is to actually start improving their life?
You actually don't. And see, this is a belief system that people go, I got to bounce off the bottom first. By the way, a lot of people who went through what I went through don't make it out. One of the thoughts I had back then is, the creator's got a sense of humor. With my luck, the gun's going to go off. I'm going to shoot myself in the spinal cord, and then I'm going to live to 250 years old because watch this, funny boy, And if I told that story in Melbourne in front of 4,000 people, and as I was in the foyer signing autographs and taking photos and stuff, a gentleman rolled out in his wheelchair and he goes, I am your story. He goes, I tried to kill myself. I went to cut my throat and stab my spinal cord, and I'm in a wheelchair for the rest of my life. So it happens. So you don't really have to hit rock bottom. That's why I share my story, and there's a thousand of them out there, is use other people's experiences, use other people's bottoming out to go, no, I ain't going there. I've seen enough. And, the brain doesn't know the difference between what's real or what's vividly imagined. So when I take people through my programs, one of the things I get them to do is create, it's called future pacing, is come up with the worst case scenario that if you don't change right now, what's it going to look like? So if you're smoking cigarettes, imagine seeing your kids in a hospital bed dying of secondhand smoke from your cigarettes, and you're trying to apologize and explain to them why they're in the, bed dying because of your smoke. I did a movie with James Woods and John Lithgow called The Boys, and it was written by one of the two guys who the movie's about, and he's a famous writer named William Link, who they wrote hit TV shows in the 70s, and he smoked. His friend didn't. His friend got secondhand smoke cancer and died in front of him, and that was his best friend, his writing partner. So that really happened. So if you use that kind of stuff or come up with the worst case scenario and you read it enough times where it hurts, your brain will go, that's it, I'm done, and you'll move on.
Mm. So that's kind of an extreme example. But if somebody's just wanting to improve their life, let's say, for instance, they're not going through the worst case scenario. They're living the sort of life where you mentioned in the beginning, they've gone from high school and, they've just let it go. They're not really, you know what I mean? They're just sort of trailing along. Things are okay, but, they're not great. How can people, use that sort of methodology or way of thinking to really live the life that they truly desire, to even realize that they have that inside them?
Well, my biggest fear is having an unfulfilled life, right? So it is actually the same thing. One of my best friends in high school, his name's Danny. Danny's father was this really overweight sales guy who had the most amazing singing voice. Like he sang a cappella and it sounded like there was an orchestra behind him. And I used to be over at their house like weekly and I'd ask him to sing for me all the time. Like I was his biggest fan. Danny had the exact same voice. And Danny and I used to sing a lot, do a lot of gigs together back in high school. His mom begged me to take him to California with me because she did not want him winding up like his dad. This guy who could have been somebody if he just had drive. But instead, the reason he was overweight and drank too much and the rest of the stuff is because he was living an unfulfilled life.
Mm.
And so Danny never came with me to California, wound up becoming an alcoholic and sings karaoke at the bar he works at, which is sinful when you have a voice like that. Like, man, if I had his voice and my drive, I'd be Michael Bublé, but so you can use that same thing of thinking about your future. If you don't go after your goals, your dreams, think about yourself as an old person with regret for the stuff you never did. By the way, on people's deathbeds, nobody ever, complains about what they did or have regret for what they did. They have regret for all the stuff they didn't do. So, future pace and think about what it's going to be like not fulfilling your dreams. I don't care what it is, by the way. It could be as, asking somebody out and then seeing them with somebody else and having somebody else's kids or, whatever. I mean, all you should do is ask them out or start your own business or like you start your own podcast, where you're like, what's the worst case scenario? What? I fail? Well, Sylvester Stallone, I've known him since I was 18 years old, and you'll see a signed poster from Slide behind me. 25 years of knowing him, finally get the poster on him, cheapskate bastard. But the thing is that, Sly turned down, $500,000 for the script of Rocky when his rent was due, right? He only, $300 rent, he only had $100. Turned it down. And he said, I want to see if I can act. And I'm never going to get a shot. I've never had an opportunity. I'm playing thugs and stupid characters. So if I fail, at least I'm going to fail on my terms. See, but he wanted to have a shot. And everybody gets a shot.
Mm.
Everybody. It all
Yeah.
comes down to what you do with your shot. And most people, yeah, I know that. Yeah, but the truth is, your shot rarely looks like what you think your shot is. So treat everything like it's your shot. Play the game full out on all that stuff and think about how wonderful it's going to be fulfilling your dreams and how painful it's going to be if you don't. And that one will drive you away from it, and the other one will pull you towards it.
And I think, yeah, a lot of people are scared of failure, which really holds them back from, taking that first step. But it's from what you're saying, it's just, think about the worst case scenario of what, if you don't take this action, what's going to happen instead of if I do take this action, worst case scenario, like think about the best case scenario.
Yeah, think of both. The truth is, most people really aren't afraid of failure, they're afraid of success. If they were afraid of failure, it would push them. See, because we move away from things we're afraid of. It's the fight or flight thing, right? We move towards what we perceive to be pleasurable, right? But somewhere in their belief system, they feel like, what if I make it and I don't get to keep it? Then I'm going to really feel bad. Or what if I get discovered that I'm not brilliant? Or whatever that is. So they keep away from the pain scenario because they go, if I don't participate, if I don't pay my rent, well, that's too painful. And they are afraid to move towards their goals and dreams. So they're in this thing. It's, by the way, this thing is not as comfortable as I think it is, but they call it the comfort zone. And the reason it's not comfortable, because in life, either you evolve or you dissolve, either you grow or decay, nothing's staying the same. But here we know the parameters of our pain. We know that if we goof off and don't do the stuff we're supposed to do, little pain motivates you. But out here, this unknown, oh my God, I don't know how far I can fall if I take that step. But the truth is, you're guaranteed to not have your goals and dreams if you don't take that step. And that's why, I'm the world record holder for firewalking. I did 81 meters of 600 grit coals in my bare feet. I've taken tens of thousands of people firewalking safely. The firewalk is that metaphor for facing your fear, taking the first step, making it, and then your brain has a whole new belief system that if I can do this that I thought was impossible, I can do whatever I want because
Mm.
I thought that was impossible. So my mom, who was a really bad alcoholic, I mean like 4 liters of scotch or vodka in a night regularly, and then violence. And, my mom, from a really amazing woman to Dr. Came to one of my programs, firewalked, and said if I could do this that I thought was impossible, giving up alcohol is easy, and my mom went clean and sober on the spot. And for the next 18 years of her life before she passed away, my mom was clean and sober.
That's incredible. And, you talk about, being in motion and taking the first step. And quite often it's, the first step that seems the absolute hardest. And tell me about, how we overcomplicate things in our mind that hold us back from, taking that first step.
Sure. Well, you know, my good friend Kathy Buckley. Kathy is the deaf comedian. And she always says, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. Because life doesn't go to plan. The thing is, you'll notice most people, they get paralysis through analysis. So they got to come up with the whole plan. Life doesn't go to plan, so it's a waste of energy because as soon as it's not going to your plan, they go, see, it's not working out, and they quit. There's only 3 things you got to know: where you are, and don't get bogged down with all kinds of heavy emotion. Just, okay, my bank account's empty. I got bills due. Great. I'm in financial trouble. Got it. You don't have to go any farther than that. Where do you want to be? And then what's the first step? That's all you got to know. Because, we want to focus on the goal to give us inspiration. But if we keep focusing on the big picture, it can get overwhelming. All you got to do is shrink it down now to a bite-sized chunk. What's the first step? Do the first step, finish it, complete it, because excellence is the commitment to completion. So complete it, and it will show you the second step, always will. That way to your goals is way more efficient, way more effective, quicker, with a lot less action steps. Because, again, the plan, people, it's way too deep, or you're watching what everybody else did. Well, that might not work for you because there's things that you are not seeing that they did, partly their mindset, doors that opened, circumstances that showed up for them that didn't show up for you. So that's not a good, accurate thing. But if you do what I just told you to do, your exact path to your success will be right there in front of you. And some people say, well, Kurek, I can't even figure out what the first step is. Well, now you know what the first step is. Find out what the first step is. You know, by the way, we have Google, we have AI now, I mean, there's biographies, autobiographies, watch what people did, not the activity, what they did, but the first thing we have to do is have the right mindset. And it's got to be open and unprejudiced. That I'm going to find a way. By the way, if you study successful people like I do, successful people, all of us say, I don't know how I'm going to do it, and I'm going to do it anyways. So that releases them from the how. Instead, you want to have a big why, a driving force, a purpose, an inspiration. My biggest one is my son. When I was single and, by myself, living in my car was acceptable. Not that I enjoyed it, but it was acceptable. Now I'm a dad, that's unacceptable. See, it raises your standard. So the life that we're living is really our minimum standard. We won't go below our minimum standard. It's not our maximum standard. Well, the key to success then is raise your minimum standard. Say, I'm not satisfied until I at least admit that. So for me, I teach my son through real life experiences. I've had my last wife cheated with a friend of mine, and stole stuff on the way out and was very highly inappropriate. I was down. It caught me off guard, left, like a left hook. Didn't even see it coming. My son saw me really down. I said, all right, buddy, you see me down? Now watch what your dad does with this. See, because my son can't stall his childhood waiting for his dad to get his stuff back together. So I'm going to use this as a teaching tool because you can't ask for a better lesson than this. And about 2 weeks later, he goes, man, it's great to have my dad back. So I use the power of inspiration, find driving force. Napoleon Hill and Think and Grow Rich calls you burning desire. That will show you that first step. And I don't care what it is. It could be writing down your goals. People go, I know my goals. Did you write them down? No. Well, then you didn't do the first step. Because the first step to achieving your goals is always to write them down, because you're going from the formless, the thought, into the form. Writing them down.
Mm.
But I know them. Great. See, you won't even take the first step. But that's why the minority will do just a little bit more than the rest of the field will do to produce results the rest of the field doesn't get. Like, so I was just in Sydney last week celebrating 25 years of having gold medals with the women's beach volleyball team. We were 5 points behind at match point, 1 point away from losing against the best team in the world, the Brazilians. And that's when most people would say, oh, shoot, it's over. My girls kicked on the energy, got the stadium on their feet. Even the Brazilian fans got caught up. They didn't know what was going on. And point by point, we took it away from 2 matches in a row and came home with gold medals. When most people would quit, my girls engaged. They couldn't consciously come up with the first step. They felt it. We need to change the energy. There it is.
Mm. Yeah. And, what's the importance here with visualization? Like, I know in your book you taught them, or you got the girls to actually visualize, that gold medal, and you actually got them to talk about being gold medal winners beforehand. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, I'm not religious. My mom was Jewish. My dad was Christian. I was just confused. Why are these people together? They shouldn't be. And it didn't last long, thank God. But in the Bible, in Genesis, the very beginning, right? God uses imagination connected with emotion, which creates creation. It produces creation. So God sees the universe, he makes it, and he says, and it is good. There's the emotion. So you're learning right there, how do you create? Because we have creative thought. There's no other being on the planet that has creative thought. So I have a blue heeler, very smart dog, wonderful dog, walking without a lead, stay with you, great. But he doesn't have creative thought. So since the beginning of dog history, not one dog has ever gone out and built his own doghouse. So an oak tree can't be a tulip, can't be a tomato. It can only be an oak tree. So it has creative energy, singular though, to only produce what it is. And energy is equally present everywhere in the universe. Elon Musk doesn't have any different energy than you or I have. We all get equal proportions because it's equally distributed out through the universe, and it's not different energy, it's the same energy. Energy is always trying to take form. So I have a farm. You can mow it down, you can poison it, you can literally to the dirt, and the weeds will come back with a passion on their own. I didn't have to grow them, I didn't have to do anything, I have to find weed seeds. It perpetuates, right? So it's always trying to take form. The thing with humans is that we can change our energy frequency through the power of visualization connected with emotion. So Einstein said that imagination is more important than knowledge. Knowledge is based in past history. Everything new ever been created is in somebody's imagination. When you have ATION at the end of a word, that means the experience of what we consistently image, imagination. So, and then expectation, the experience of what you expect to have happen, is the magic bullet that has to be there, is so that we have visualization with emotion connected by expectation, because I can tell you right now everything you've been expecting in life just by looking at your results, because we get what we expect. So raise
Mm.
your expectations and you will live up to those expectations. And that's what I've done with my life. That's why most people, they kind of look at my life and they go, man, you've lived like 15 lifetimes. How have you jammed so much in? Because of that fear of living an unfulfilled life, I expect a lot out of my life. I expect a lot out of me. And the funny thing is, I've always lived up to that. Like, as you know, my my
Mm.
my book's being turned into a movie. And first, my book's the number one bestseller. My dad didn't think I could read, let alone write. He cried when I got a publisher and an agent. Yet I had to learn how to write. It wasn't my natural talent. So I hired a wordsmith and I had to learn publicity and publishing and ed- uh, um, editing and marketing and online campaigns. That's why my book's a bestseller, by the way. Now it's being turned into a movie. They asked me to write and direct a film. I'm like, that's not what I do. And I even tried to hire a writer and director, that a really high quality one. And then they kept insisting. And I finally said, you know what? You're right. I got to do it. So guess what? I raised my expectations that not only am I going to direct a film that's going to win 5 Academy Awards, win film festivals, do $250 million in the box office, because I'm having that high expectation and I see it as that. It's funny, all of a sudden I watch movies differently. I'm picking up camera shots and creative thoughts. The script's done. I'm on my 10th rewrite right now, because every time I read it, it gets better. It expands. The characters kind of write the story with you, because they start taking form, and there it is. Because I expect it out of myself, but I see. By the way, if I showed you my sorry, to see there's here is the Academy Awards, right? Film festivals, all my goals up there, all my affirmations and stuff. So I surround myself with the visualization. Matter of fact, just before I got on a call with you, is I'm ordering a mock-up Academy Award
Amazing.
so that I can practice holding it, just like I did with the beach volleyball girls, getting their
Yeah.
medals. I made them buy display cases for their gold medals 2.5 years before the Olympics. I said, if you really thought you were a gold medalist, when do you have a display case to show your medals off in?
Yeah, you'd be ready for it. And so that really demonstrates how what we focus on grows. Whereas a lot of people are, sort of still stuck in their mammalian brains that are, attached to survival and fear. And, how do we get out of that? Because it's so strong and can be so sticky. What?
Yes. Okay. So when you say so strong, what you're talking about is a conditioned pattern or habit. That's all it is. It's just a condition. If we quit calling it strong and we use a less intense word, it will be less intense. But if we're going to use heavy words, it's going to feel heavy. If we're going to use intense words, it's going to be intense. Number one. Two is make a decision, right? Going, I don't care how hard it is, I'm doing it. A decision is not a should. Oh, I should quit smoking. I should start exercising. I should. Most people wind up shooting all over themselves. You'll get it. Uh, we've all done stuff. We've all said, I shouldn't do that. We did it anyways. I should do this. We don't do it. It's got to be a must. That's where I said, write that worst case scenario. We're going, oh no, I'm done. We're going. Let's go. So make a decision. People tell me it takes a long time for them to quit smoking. No, it didn't. It took you a long time to make the decision to finally never touch another cigarette. But once you decide, boom, it changes immediately. Next is be consistent to your decision, right? Nobody goes to the gym once and works out and thinks you're buff for the rest of your life. So you got to be consistent by being committed to that decision. But again, Maxwell Maltz, who wrote Psycho-Cybernetics in 1960, said if you do something for 21 consecutive days, it produces a new habit. See, we're just creatures of habit, so you produce a new habit. Now it's not even that hard to be successful when you make success your habit. Last but not least is investment. You have to put something in to get something out. You can't eat an apple, take the seeds, plant it, and get the tree that grew the apple you just ate. That doesn't make any sense. Or you can't ask the fireplace for heat and then you'll give it the log. So you got to put something in to get something out. And so, that could be money, that could be time, that could be education. So, in my car, like when I drive, there's always personal development playing on the radio, a CD player. Yes, my car still has a CD player, because, well, I'm driving anyways. But you got to fill your head with that stuff. So I'm investing and I learn new stuff. Even, what I'm listening to now, I probably listened to it about 250 times. I've read the book numerous times. I've read The Science of Getting Rich by Wallace D. Wattles at least 250 times. I got more highlighting and tabs coming out of pages than there's actually text in the page. But that's because I don't want to know it. I want to master it. I want to sound like that. I want to speak like that. I want to think like that. Then everything you're talking about, then you have a new conditioned pattern. Because here's the magic for everybody. I used to be homeless. I used to live under buildings. Not talking about for a week or years. I lived in my car for a year and a half in one go. I lived under buildings in Chicago and out in parks. So if I knew what I knew now, obviously I would have never been in that situation back then. So if I can do it, anybody can do it. It's just that I reconditioned myself and my brain to have new thoughts, which then generate into new actions. By the way, a thought is an action. It's not this fluffy, nebulous, formless thing. It's an activity. It already starts motion. Backed with emotion, that gets you into physical action, and that will produce your results. And now, for me to be successful or take on new endeavors and succeed, it's easier. Not that it's not challenging at times. Of course it is, because it's new. You got to learn new things. You got to reinvent yourself. But I have conditioned patterns that I didn't have back then that kind of get me right into motion on those things.
And just going back to living in your car, I know in your book you've talked about not being saved. I think so
Yeah.
many people are waiting to be saved. I know that I've had moments where I've waited to be saved and have been saved. And on the other side, it's been an absolute shit show. So tell me how you've rejected, being saved and why that was an integral part of you sort of, learning what you needed to learn to save yourself.
Yeah, well, I think you're talking about I was doing my first movie in 1983 where I had speaking role. And the movie's called Two of a Kind with John Travolta, Olivia Newton-John. John and I instantly became friends on the movie. We looked very similar to each other, certainly back then. Now I know his brothers and his sisters and everybody. It's become kind of like family. And, John on the set, because we're shooting all night long at Warner Brothers. And John says, hey, on Saturday, let's go out to dinner. Let's hang out and, have some dinner or something. I'm like, great. I said, where do you want to meet? He goes, no, I'll pick you up. I said, I don't know if that's a good idea. And he said, Kurek, you can't live too far. He goes, every time I'm driving to the studios, I see you bicycling by. So you can't live too far. And I said, John, I live in a Hotel Cadillac. And he goes, Hotel Cadillac? I said, yeah. And I gave him the address and he goes, It's a residential neighborhood. There's no hotels. And I go, you'll see it. Next day, I'm standing in a curb, and stretched limousine comes by, and there's out steps John Travolta. And he goes, "Where's this hotel you live in?" I go, "I'm leaning on it. It's a 1972 Coupe de Ville Cadillac. It's not even a motorhome anymore because it broke down about 6 months ago." And he goes, "You're not homeless." And I go, "Absolutely, I am." And he starts getting a little emotional about it. I said, "Whoa, would you like a tour?" And he goes, "Okay." So I sat in the back seat, and there's my pillow, my blankets all folded up, and he cried. I said, "John, don't get emotional. Tour's not over yet." So I got him to sit in the front seat, and he goes, "Okay, what room's this?" I go, "Entertainment center. See, there's a radio in the dashboard, big screen TV, crazy stuff happens out there. It's called the windscreen." I showed him the boot, I said, "This is my wardrobe. You probably don't want to see the bathroom." And John offered me. Now John was renting Brian De Palma's house, famous movie director. He was renting his house in Mulholland Drive, which is like the Hollywood Hills, and this place is a mansion. And he said, "Kurek, my mom would never forgive me if I leave you here." He said, "You're going to live with me. I'll give you a wing of the house, keys, come and go as you please." I said, "Can't do it." He goes, "What do you mean?" I go, "John, you're going to teach me how to get weak." And he goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "John, because I'm not learning how to get at my own condition, my own circumstances." And then one day, what? I live with you for 20 years, and then I overstay my welcome. And I get used to you buying stuff and food and transport and everything else. I mean, um, one day you're going to say, "Kurek, it's time for you to go." Now I'm in a worse condition because I've had all this time of not learning how to work on myself. Thank you very much. By the way, it'd be really cool to be roommates with John Travolta, but it ain't going to happen. But within a year and a half, John called me up and said, "I'm doing another movie. You'd be perfect for it." And I actually had met the writer and the producer and director of it, which the director is James Woods. He did Urban Cowboy, and that movie's called Perfect with John Travolta and Jamie Lee Curtis. I had already been in an apartment by then, so I got myself out of it and spent 4 months on that movie. It's still to this day the highest paid movie I've ever been on, and turned my life around. So, people saving you. Well, there's a story in my book about the butterfly, and it's in the cocoon, and it's struggling to get out of the little hole, and this guy's watching it, and he's seeing it fighting to get out of the little hole, and so he feels sorry for the butterfly trying to fight his way out, so he literally cuts the cocoon open and let it out. But guess what he didn't understand is it's that challenge, that struggle of going through that hole that forms the butterfly's body and its wings. And instead, it was always deformed, never formed its wings properly, and died on the ground, never getting to fly. And so, by saving it, he literally ruined its opportunity to have an amazing life.
Mm. I love your perception about your living circumstances in your car. I think perception is so important. And how can we shed light on things or difficult or challenging situations that we have and shift our perception so it's a more empowering perception?
Exactly what you asked. Number one is, ask, how can I look at this in an empowering way? You got to remember is that when we ask a question, we're always going to get the answer to that question, no matter what. So ask only empowering questions focused on the outcome that you want, not the outcomes you don't want, because either way, you're going to get them. By the way, there's no judgment in this strategy. You're going to get whatever you asked for. Again, it's biblical. Ask and it will be given. So if most people are asking, why am I so stupid? Why do I always find the wrong partner? How come this always keeps happening to me? You don't want those answers. Or why is always a disempowering question. Why did they do that? Why did this happen? All it's doing is coming up with references for how you got the outcome that you don't want, which makes it worse because it really makes it strong now. Instead, ask only empowering questions focused on the outcome that you want, including what's great about this. And that will instantly shift your perception. And about, my father, I'm my dad's only child. My dad was my hero, my Superman, and he got cancer. I talked to him every day from the time he first had a heart attack to open heart surgery. And I was talking to him every week anyways, but now every day. And this is going on for months until they discovered he had lung cancer from smoking cigarettes. And they gave him 6 months to live. I'm talking to him every day. I'm supposed to be on the Sunrise TV show in Sydney. So that was like on a Thursday, Friday. I'm going to fly back to the States to be with him. I talked to him that morning. I'm going on a TV show. Later in the afternoon, they called me, and hospice nurse, she said, your dad's not going to make it. I said, ma'am, my dad's Superman. He's just tired. She said, sir, I see this all the time. Your dad's going to pass away. And I said, well, please let me talk to him. She goes, he's too weak. And I said, he doesn't need to speak. He needs to hear me. And I said, Dad, it's me. I will always love you. I will always make you proud. Don't struggle. Don't fight. Don't suffer. Go to peace, Dad. I love you. My dad smiled. He closed his eyes and went to sleep and passed away. They called me back 10 minutes later. He said, whatever you said to your dad, that's the last conversation he had. And, I didn't make it home in time. By the way, he could have died when I'm on the plane. He could have died before I walked in the door of his house. And some people wear that for the rest of their life. Oh my God, I didn't get there in time.
Mm.
God's got bigger plans than we got, and I'm not privy to his plans, nor does he consult me on what the plans are. So I asked, what's great about this? Well, my dad died when I was 44, not 4 years old or 4 months old. My dad didn't suffer. I had that last conversation with my dad. My dad and I had a great relationship. I'm kind of glad I didn't make it home because I never saw my dad sick. I only have the image of my dad as my dad. If I would have made it home, that would have been great. See? And so, and the other thing is that I talked to my stepmom after my dad passed away, and I said, Pauline, I don't know how you want to deal with the estate and stuff. I'm not really concerned. She said, I don't know how to tell this to you, Kurek, but your dad took you out of the will and off the insurance. I said, it's awesome. And she said, why is that awesome? I said, because my dad knew I was a success. I didn't need his money. I couldn't ask for a better compliment. And she said, he said that you would understand it. It's just, as his wife to his only child, it's hard to explain. I said, I got it. I said, I'm honored that my dad saw me as a success. See, when you ask what's great about it, that's what you'll find. And that will change the way you feel. So one of my I am statements, my identity statements that I say every morning is that I am responsible for how I feel at all times. Because when we choose a different feeling about anything, what we're really doing is lowering the frequency, the conscious awareness of our energy, and that feeling is telling us what frequency we're on. And if you don't like it, it's a call to action to change what you're doing to get a different feeling, because the feeling's the byproduct of the energy that you're on. And by the way, we all know when we're feeling great, we produce great. We have better thoughts, we have better creativity, we take better actions. When we're feeling bad, we say and do stuff that we later regret. Well, that tells you right there. If you regretted it, you knew you weren't supposed to do it and you did it anyways. But when nobody ever does stuff that you regret when you're feeling great. You don't say inappropriate things to people when you're feeling great. Nobody's ever been in a super happy mood and said stuff that you had to apologize for. So it's always showing us where we are. Ask a new question, focused on the outcome you want. It's going to change your feeling and you're going to start instantly producing new results.
Amazing. And, referencing that as well, when it's, we're giving our power away when we're, not taking responsibility for something, or we're becoming a victim of something. Let's talk about, our power and how important it is for us to live in our power, like not blaming, not making excuses, not pointing fingers.
Well, it's funny that you say that. You hear people say it all the time. I'm guilty of these things in my past as well. Now I'm just more trained, more conditioned. People going, oh, she really pissed me off. Oh, he made me mad. Oh, that situation I saw in the news made me sick to my stomach. Well, the truth is, none of those three things have the power to do that. Nobody, unless somebody's sticking their arm up your backside like Kermit the Frog and working your controls, they can't. What we're really saying is that we allowed them to lower our conscious awareness to a lower frequency, and that's why we're feeling bad. We allowed them. They had no power to do that. So these days, when people act inappropriate around me, whatever that is, I just go, oh, it's good for them. First, I have legs that work. I can walk away. One of my number one ways to walk away when I'm around people and they start going off on their tangents and stuff. By the way, this is family and friends as well. I'm going to call them really friends because my friends don't act that way. But, people that acquaintances, I always tell them I have diarrhea, because nobody ever argues with you when you say that. And it gives you a perfect escape route to go exit. Because Napoleon Hill, who wrote Think and Grow Rich, he said that first you have to be the guardian at the gate around your mind to decipher what you allow in or not. Because if you allow the wrong thoughts in your mind, it will create chaos and havoc to your life. So I'm a product of my environment like anybody else. So I dictate my environment. I do not give power away to people and saying, she did that to me, he did that to me. I got ripped off in Singapore for $250,000 in cash. I sold out the indoor stadium and then the promoters ripped me off and stopped payment on my check as I was on a plane flying back to Australia. People go, you're not even upset. I go, well, you might get my money, but you don't get my happiness. They're not connected. By the way, is when you're happy, you can make more money. But if you're upset about that money, you're focused backwards, and that means that you can only create limited. If I focus forward, imagination connected with emotion, I can create limitless. So the number one key distinction for anybody listening to this, seeing this, if you get nothing out of today's call but this is the game changer. This is the most powerful thing ever. The number one key distinction between successful people, and I mean holistically, not just money, happiness, health, relationship, wealth, all that stuff, and the masses. By the way, the masses, the most consumed drug on the planet, are called antidepressants. The masses. The difference is we all go through the same stuff. Everybody went through COVID, whether you got it or not, we had to deal with it. Everybody through the global financial crisis. Everybody's got family members that piss you off or irritate you or do things or steal or whatever. Who cares? Everybody. The difference is that we learn how to manage how we think and feel differently. And when you think and feel differently, you're going to respond or act differently, and that's going to produce a different result. So when the global financial crisis, everybody's panicked and, freaking out and jumping out of windows and selling their properties and closing their businesses down. Successful people were buying them because they were cheaper. Same scenario. So people got wealthy. By the way, people got wealthy during the Great Depression. Most people suffered. They don't want to tell you that because that sure kills the narrative that everybody was suffering. That's not true. Only the masses were suffering. The minority managed how they thought, just like AI coming in. Everybody's worried about losing their job. Okay, well then learn some new skill sets. If you see the pain coming, don't sit there like on the railroad tracks and wait for the train to run you over, right? You might want to get on board with the train. Maybe you want to learn AI to create a new business, but that's managing. That's why I don't watch the news. I don't scroll on social media anymore because, if you notice, there's algorithms and you're scrolling positive stuff. And all of a sudden, not positive stuff comes up, right? And then it's lots more of that. So, but I don't know from the positive one to the negative one when that's going to happen. And all of a sudden I let something else or someone else put that garbage in my mind. And I can tell you, the Charlie Kirk thing makes you angry and you want to, get, even with the people who did it. And certainly the people laughing about or okay, but there's more than two choices. We're in a field of infinite possibilities. It's not pro Kirk or anti Charlie Kirk. There's more than two choices. Mine is unify people. because the powers that be, the evil powers that be, they want to separate us. They want us fighting amongst ourselves because then we're not paying attention to what they're doing. Instead, unify people. By the way, that's what Charlie Kirk was doing. So even the people hating the people who are happy Charlie Kirk was killed are not doing what Charlie Kirk asked. You know, um, you know, most Christians aren't doing what Jesus was teaching either. Most Buddhists aren't acting like what Buddha was teaching either. The fact is that they were about unity. The Quran actually sounds just like the Bible when you read it. There is no jihad. There is no killing innocent people. By the way, you've killed innocent people in the Quran, you are damned forever. There's no forgiveness for that. It even says, leave the Jews and the Christians alone. They've already found their way to God. It was for people who are lost and wandering. I was over in Kuwait. People said my content comes right out of the Quran, and it was all about love. And by the way, when you're over in Arab countries, the service over there is the warmest, most loving service. And I asked about it. They call it Arab hospitality. It's funny how nobody told you about that in the news.
100%. And, you've talked about unity before. What does unity mean to you, and how do you want to bring more unity into the world?
It's called the processional effect. And the processional effect is known as the ripple effect, right? So every action creates an opposite and equal reaction. So a pebble hits the water, creates a ripple. That ripple creates another one, goes all the way out, touches the shores, and comes back. It's called the law of circulation. So the results that we want, what people don't understand is they're not going to come to us unless we put the action, the thought out first, because that produces the result. So by me helping other people having a great life, how's that going to start? Me having one first, me being happy first. You can't teach somebody else how to have six-pack abs when you're a fat guy. It doesn't work, right? Robert Kiyosaki, who wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad, said, Kurek, the most expensive advice that you'll ever get is free advice from poor people. And they're always the ones who want to give it to you. Instead, make your life a masterpiece, and then through example, show others that they can too, and start helping people. Because one of the mindset, because how are you going to have abundance in your life if scarcity mentality keeps occupying your mind? So the abundant mind says, I want to share this, because real wealth comes with making your friends and family healthy, wealthy, happy, and successful with you. Not all will go, but the ones that do. And that's why, Stallone, if you ever see his documentary on Netflix, you'll see that he says, talking about getting to the top of the mountain, which he did. And he said, when you're up here, the air is really thin, it's really precarious, and it's lonely. And he said, so you gotta, if you know Sly, his group of friends that knew him before he ever made it are still the group of guys that he hangs out with, because they treat him like a human being. They all trust each other. They've all earned trust with each other, but he's also put him in his movies and the rest of that stuff, just like Mark Wahlberg has, or Adam Sandler. You see him do it. All his friends are always in his movies because that's his circle. But spread it. And that's what I do professionally, is I'm also out there spreading it and teaching people. And, I've been in front of over 1 million people, and with the movie coming out, that's going to expand way bigger than that. And it's about showing the real Kurek Ashley every time I'm on stage, so that people go, man, you're not an image. You're not a character. You're the same guy on stage as you're off. But yeah, absolutely. Because if I can do it, anybody can do it. But if you see this fake preacher up there, and then you meet this guy who's completely different, which, by the way, there's a lot of people in my industry who are like that. It's disappointing to me when I meet him and I looked up to him, and then you're like, man, backstage, you're like a foul-mouthed, aggressive person. It's nothing. Where's the Mr. Emotional state management?
I guess that, yeah, I guess that comes back to, the way that you look at life and your theory around be, do, have. I think a lot of people are, either creating an image, or, like you said, or creating the life thinking that they're going to have all the happiness and joy and wealth and success. Whereas, your model is really about being that person and taking those actions to have those results.
Yes, be happy, with yourself. So I live on a farm. My son's 13 years old. He spends, half the week with his mom. It can get very quiet here on the farm. Some people could feel very lonely, but I say I've learned how to be happy with myself. I've learned how not to be lonely. Now, by the way, I used to be the loneliest guy in history. And Hollywood and all that stuff. I always had to have the action around me. I've learned that's from working on myself, to be happy within myself. That gives me that availability to be on stage and be me, so that when people meet me, I'm okay if you don't like me. Sometimes people, I thought your stuff was crap. God bless you. I'm okay. I'm not for everybody. I'm not everybody's flavor. That's great. Some people, aren't into personal development at all. Some people don't like that you're happy. Some people don't like your success. Some people don't like that you don't drink. Man, you go to a party, and I've had people come across huge parties or bars and stuff going, I'm upset that you're not drinking alcohol. And I go, well, maybe you should drink some more so you're not so upset at me. Uh, and do you have a problem? No, I didn't. I just didn't really support me anymore. And I felt like it was limiting the level of quality of life that I want, and the experience of life that I want, and the sensors to feel life at that level. Plus, I want to set a great example for my son. Like he can choose whatever he wants to do when he grows up, but at least, he sees his dad, in shape, healthy, happy, peaceful, content, successful, alcohol free, cigarette free, these things is that, he's going to, by the way, kids don't do what you tell them to do. They do what they see you doing. They live through example. That's why I say be the example that you want to, even Buddha said, be the change that you want to have the world happen, that you want happening in the world. Be it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And just one sort of final wrap up piece. If somebody listening is feeling stuck right now, what's the first step that they can take today to change their path?
Great question. Because there's that first step. And the thing is, I had lunch in Beverly Hills with, Sly invited me to his restaurant in Beverly Hills with Arnold Schwarzenegger, because I was going to be on stage with Arnold in Sydney, and wanted me to meet him and get to know him a couple months before my speaking engagement with him. And Arnold said to me at the table, now, by the way, the guy's the best bodybuilder ever, and there might be people with bigger titles or more titles than him. Everybody knows Arnold Schwarzenegger. Not everybody. Bodybuilders might know other bodybuilders, but everybody knows Arnold. Movie star, governor, he said, Kurek, the biggest misconception of me is that I'm a self-made man. He said, the truth is I've had help every step of the way, bodybuilder, movie star, governor. And he said, the only reason that I got help was I asked for it. He said, only poor people try to do it by themselves. Now, see, I love hanging out with people like that because I'm listening to those things, and that's the stuff, as you can hear, verbatim. I can repeat it back because I lock that in. I go, there's that guy saying that. And the truth is that when I learned to start asking for help, man, did my life get easier, because I'm a very masculine male. Friends of mine who know me go, Kurek, man, finally asked for help. It's about time. I knew I could help you, but you're so strong-willed. I was afraid to even approach it with it, right? And by the way, just because people see you suffering doesn't mean people are going to offer it to you. You got to ask for it. Ask and it will be given, right? So you got to ask for help. And, only ask from people that actually have the result. Don't ask the poor person how to get wealthy. Makes sense, right? So if you don't have those people in your life, there's a thing called YouTube. There's a thing called autobiographies, biographies, library. That's what I did when I was homeless. I lived in the library because I knew those books could change my life. Now you have Google. It's in your pocket. You can go and find anything. Go to YouTube. Most people are going on there watching each other kick each other in their groin or twerking or something stupid instead of something that can change your life. AI, ask, come up with prompts. It will give you tools. What's the first step? I want to do this with my life. What is it? And it will tell you. Ask for help. Then when you get around people, ask them. By the way, most successful people are very abundant because they knew that somebody extended a hand to them. So we owe it back to others to extend a hand to others. The thing, though, is that if one of the things I'm famous for amongst my peer group is, and Stallone said this to me last time I was with him, where I said, Sly, thank you for all you've done for me and mentoring me. You and John Hirschfeld, his best friend, who's my Mr. Miyagi, by the way. And John and Sly were roommates in college. That's how I've gotten to know Sly for so long. I said, thanks for being my mentor. And he goes, Kurek, if it wasn't me, you would have found somebody. That was you. But the one thing is that when you asked for help, and here's the magic bullet, you put it into action immediately. And you followed through. And then you would come back and report to us what happened for you and what you did it. That gave us the ability to want to help you again. But most people, they ask for help, they don't do anything with it. Then they're coming back asking for more help. Well, man, if you didn't do step number one, you ain't getting step number two for me, because now you're wasting my time, which I don't allow anybody to do. And most successful people are going to feel the same way. Get it, put it into action. The fortune's always in the follow through, right? You can quit that close before the finish line and you didn't follow through. There's no result. It's always in the follow through until you complete it. And that's what I do, is ask for help and then put it into action.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I am so grateful for your time and energy, and I look forward to chatting with you again soon.
And I'm super proud of you for doing this, because, it's you. It's the same thing. You're stepping up to the plate. I'm honored that you've asked me onto your show. Anytime you want me back, I'll be honored. Send me the link. We'll send it out to everybody. It's you. I know you faced your own fears, and that's why you're a great person to do this podcast, because for everybody that you're helping, you're the living example of it. So God bless you, and thanks for having me on your show.